now that I've memorized the details of this book, that I've had it for a couple of hours.
Oh, good, so you've got instant recall. Excellent.
Yeah, I wish.
And what's really helpful about this is the city manager is really going to walk.
Aaron, do you want your water?
Good, because,
Oh, that's my leftover. I think my first budget
Yeah.
meeting, five and
Yeah.
a half years ago, I just completely glazed over.
Oh.
I'm like, huh, what?
started to get that feeling in general. There's been so much so fast. I mean, that's why I asked you about the intensity this morning. It's like, is every three months like these last? Yeah, right.
By April, when things have to be in effect. by
Oh, I
April
know,
1.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you'll be going.
So we get things can calm
damn.
down.
Hey, Kevin, I'm really sorry about the Ravens. I really am.
Made it a week longer than the Steelers.
Oh, nicely done, nicely done, nicely done.
That was an exciting ending.
Both of those games. How
The
about that
16,
Chicago
the
game?
16-15, that's the one that
Oh,
made me
that poor
very
kicker.
nervous
Oh, the
yesterday.
Eagles? That was incredible.
It was
what happened.
Eagles Bears, right? Yeah.
How about that kicker? Do
That
you
was,
ever?
oh.
Oh, that poor guy.
Does he have a job today? I'm
Probably
thinking
not.
he doesn't. Poor guy.
God, that poor guy. I mean, I'm glad Philly won, to be honest.
wait for him.
I mean, but
Oh, I am.
not that. Well, you know what, and what people forget is it should never come down to 16-15 for him, but that is his job.
He had one job to
Give
do.
him one job.
One job.
One job.
Whenever you're ready.
But the Bears deserved it.
You let me know.
Much better season.
They would.
The Bears had a much better season.
Sharon, Commissioner
But-
Schlosser's got a couple
Good
things
for
to say
Philly.
right
I
mean-
before.
Sports
So
go.
as soon as we do the roll call, I'll give it to her.
Coin.
On any given
Good
Sunday.
for
only got
Philly,
it.
though.
They say.
Yeah, any given Sunday, you're
Uh-huh.
right.
I didn't see much of it, but I saw that, I put the TV on earlier this morning. They must
I-
have shown that kick
Oh,
100 times.
yeah.
And I thought, all right, enough.
Poor guy. Only every time, I'm sure he's just not watching anything, 'cause that's
Right.
all that's being shown.
Yeah. If you keep these any closer to me, I'm gonna start digging into your
Oh,
stash.
help yourself, I brought extras.
Oh, okay.
They're just from in the
Oh, are they?
caucus room.
Oh.
They're city property.
Oh, my
Mayor,
God.
I
Oh,
just handed
well,
out
then everyone
a
should.
handout.
Yeah, I got
a
it.
good
If I
one.
No.
could just have 30 seconds.
We
to
are in-
say
You
what
have
it
30
is.
seconds, are you
That's-
kidding?
I can
Okay,
probably,
you're
I
gonna
can
have
do
30
it, I can do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's 30 seconds, you're gonna take 15. All right?
Yeah, I never
I'm
thought
gonna
I'd
time
put
her.
down.
If she goes over, then I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
exactly.
Where somebody takes, at my age, takes out social security right there. I thought after a certain age, maybe they didn't deduct that any longer when you're a recipient of
Isn't that funny?
them.
Isn't it funny?
I'm going to call this meeting to order. And if you could just show that all 7 commissioners are present, please. And I'd like to try to keep this to 2 hours so we can focus on 3 o'clock. We've got scheduled 5 more over the next 2 months plus, so I think that should be plenty of time. And before we get into the city manager and the budget, 2 of the commissioners had something that they'd like to say. Commissioner Schlosser.
Yep. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, just kind of a best practice budget process, as we know, kind of starts off with an understanding of, vision and goals and priorities from, the legislative body. So what we did last year was actually just spend a little bit of time among the commissioners talking about, our particular visions and trying to come to a consensus on what we see as a vision for the city as we go into this discussion. So we have a framework that allows us to consider the budget presented by the city manager in the context of what our vision, goals and priorities are. So I just prepared, shared it. It'll be public as well. But just the purpose of what I want to just discuss today is, just spend about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But how was the 18-19 budget formulation execution process? And is there anything we learned from that we should incorporate as we're thinking about the 19-20 process? I'd love to hear, from anybody here or afterwards or during this process from the public and others on what, if we're missing anything in the process here that should be considered. Just making sure that our budget and performance management all the way through our organization are linked. And like what we did last year and what I hope to do just in this conversation is just think about what our collective vision is so that we're starting at at least a semi-common baseline as we're looking at the city manager's budget. So, last year we kind of started with a vision that we had at least some degree of consensus on, and it was that we wanted to build a culture of hospitality, transparency, inclusiveness, and service excellence among the community. And we wanted to institutionalize practice to ensure that city services meet our resident, local business, and guest needs. We also then, for the first time, actually took that vision, those goals, and then flowed them into the city manager's goals for the year, which was develop and implement practices and services to ensure our city's clean, safe, and hospitable for all stakeholders. Formulate, execute, monitor, and provide transparency into the budget. Make sure that we have great organizational staffing strategies, and to continue to improve on communication. So I just wanted to kind of spend a minute talking here now on several questions that I'd love for the other commissioners just to weigh in on just as we set this process off. And I think these will be questions we'll discuss, and they're not to be, this is the first time, but something we get. So, one is, what's our vision for the city of Rehoboth Beach? Is it what it's been in the past, which is we want to create a clean, safe, and hospitable environment for all stakeholders, businesses, guests, and residents? That's what it was in the past. Do we agree with that? Is there something else? What do we think really big opportunities are, and are they included in the budget? What are our particular goals and things that we hear from our constituents that should be included? What are some priority investment areas? And then how can we continue to build on something we talked about last year, and that's the principle of hospitality to all in our vision. So just I don't think my vision and goals have changed since last year, and that is that I want everything we do, from what we do here as the commissioners, through the city manager's goals, throughout the city services provided, that we do provide a clean, safe, and hospitable, very hospitable, and I put a big underscore on hospitable environment for all of our stakeholders. So that's, to me, my vision. And I think there are some really big opportunities this year, and for me, those are, really focusing on, beautification across the city, making sure that we support through better permitting processes our businesses and our residents. Those are kind of the main things I wanted to start with. So I just wanted to lay that out, particularly the vision that we worked under last year, and see if we had a general consensus on that, so we can again look at the budget in that context. So I just see if any other commissioners had any thoughts or anything we should all think about visionary or strategy-wise as we go into this.
Lisa, I could just quickly add,
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that via email with all of us a couple of days ago. That was helpful to me, this being my first budget meeting and my first budget season. So it was very useful to look at that document. There was nothing surprising in it, nothing that was new to me, but which is very good to kind of refresh my mind with a sense of what drives budget development. And ideally what we need is a common vision among us as we go forward, because you don't just pluck numbers out of the air and throw them like a dart at good ideas. You really need something solid there, and that's what that said to me, and there weren't any surprises. So I certainly agree with what was in that document that you utilized a year ago. So thanks for sharing. It was helpful.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm basically the same as I was last year, and I'm looking forward to what the city manager has to be put in front of us, because that's going to really define what we can do. I think on Saturday, somebody talked about, our needs and our wishes. And I think, unfortunately, we've got an awful lot of needs, and the wishes hopefully can come. But I think the needs, but I'm looking forward to hearing what the city manager has to say.
Well, and I'd just like to support what Commissioner Schlosser said. I don't have any quarrel with that, but I would also point us to, I think it's so important to get our basic financial house in order. I've had a lot of people talk about how much debt the city is in, how we're going to repay that debt, and I know that we all have lists of items that we would like to launch into that are new, and I think it's just the way I think. I need to get more comfortable with how we are going to keep up with the commitments that we've already made, what that's going to feel like to everybody, and then think about, are there other opportunities? Because we may be in the business of having to find additional revenue just to get our financial house in order, which is exactly what it feels like to me. So it's really a balance of what can we do this year and then incrementally to support all the things that you just talked about, both the mayor and Commissioner Schlosser.
I'd say ditto to all that, and I think y'all know from past speeches that my mantra has always been take care of the old before we create new things. And that includes planning and planning ahead, not just for projects, but planning ahead to be able to have sufficient funding in place to implement those projects, but also that maintenance needs to be an integral part of these projects. And then, of course, I've always looked at a hierarchy of our needs, putting maintenance and being clean, safe, and friendly, but particularly maintenance ahead of new projects, and for new projects, addressing those with verified needs, with visitor enhancements or whatever, but verified needs over the new projects that are closer to the wish list type of thing. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I just support what Commissioner Schlosser says in terms of how we move forward. I'm perfectly fine, and in terms of what Stan's saying, the maintenance that's been deferred is got to be a big concern of ours, and how we move forward with that is very important.
I wish I had something to add, but you all have covered it very well, so I'm on board.
All right, great.
Thank you. Thanks,
Stan-
Paul.
Stan, you had something?
I just, real quick, I passed out a handout. It's out on a table out in the back there, so members of the public can grab it. It's just a very quick summary excerpted from the minutes of a listing of our boardwalk topics and some of the rankings, and you'll see that we really ranked them as high, low, and lower priority. We found it difficult to rank them 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, we certainly could do that if you needed. And there's no expectation that these projects, any of them, all of them are in this budget. Our expectation from the committee is that they would be seriously considered, that's all. So we thank you.
So my question to you is possibly, could you get grants for this? Have you looked into grants for some of these things? Or no?
That would be addressed to them. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Whatever, in the boardwalk committee, their suggestion of doing some things as far as like the baby changing stations.
Did you get one?
I don't know if you have grants for something like that or not.
Some of those are incorporated in the CIP.
Yeah? No, not really. I mean, yes, it is incorporated in the CIP, but I'm wondering, I'm looking for sources, money. I'm looking for money outside of the city.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we'll go into as we move forward
Okay.
with that.
And what I'll add too is that I know one of the recommendations has been installing video cameras along the boardwalk. So the city of Rehoboth Beach, as a member of the Delaware League of Local Governments, has free access to a consultant that does research related to grants for public safety, mostly related to Homeland Security grants. So we've been in contact with him. Essentially what we just need to do is put together a scope of work, whether we want to hardwire the cameras or wirelessly connect the cameras, and then work with him in order to submit a grant application for that work. So.
What might be helpful during these conversations is a lot of the commissioners aren't familiar necessarily with all these is, one is, remember, we have a written report on all or most of these that you can reference. And also it would be nice at some time during the budget process that we get maybe an idea of whether these are on the back burner, which ones are going forward, because I know some have momentum and some probably don't. Thank you.
All yours. Thank you.
Members of the public who are here behind me, sorry
Well,
to
that
have
doesn't sound like you're picking up very well.
sorry to have my back to the public, but
Yeah, maybe if you pull that closer to you.
that's where we need to be right now. Can you hear me? Is
Better,
that better?
a little bit.
Okay. So I wanted to start by not putting the cart before the horse, because I've laid out the budget and some of the priorities that I have with the staff. Certainly some issues related to that, as always in any budget process. But I wanted to, at least from the beginning, spend some time talking about what we actually did this year in this current 2019 budget, and talk to you about how that was successful for many reasons, and then how we've incorporated some of those changes that we did this year into next year's budget. Three of you are new, maybe not to the process, but to my process, and brand new to the budget discussion. So I will go back and, reiterate anything, but that might be helpful to you. But if I step above that, because most of the commissioners have been aware, please, stop me, and I'll be happy to go back and help you with that. So the first thing that changed from last year, or I should say that changed this year that we had not done in prior years, was to bring the department heads into the discussion and have them actually come to your budget meetings. I'm going to continue that again this year because I think it's very important, not only for the department heads to be able to defend anything that you might have a question about, but it's also important that the department heads meet each of you face to face, and you meet them certainly. So not that you don't know them, but this is an important part of the process. So I'll continue to do that. This year, rather than what we did last year, I'm very happy that we have a Director of Public Works here who's seated at the table to be able to talk about any of the engineering components that you'll recall from last year. I brought in our two consulting engineers, one from Beacon Engineering, Bob Palmer, and our other from Kersher Engineering, Alan Kersher. So very pleased that in the past 6 months, Mr. Williams is here to be able to capitalize on some of these improvements and be able to explain them to you as a staff member himself. And I would like to, just as I did last year, start with the capital improvement plan. I don't know, the three new commissioners probably don't have a copy of this, but we'll get this to you. This is the capital improvement plan that was started this year, and that is a 5-year capital plan. So I believe the importance of this enhances the overall quality of the city by explaining and actually outlining the physical structures and the systems and our infrastructure. And it's something that, in my opinion, was much needed. And then can outline for you and also the public just what we have in front of us, and it lays that plan out just very systematically. Also, I usually start by highlighting any of the personnel changes, which I'm happy to do, and explain the need for those. The police department, we're incorporated in this next year budget are 8 additional seasonal officers. The costs associated with that And that is basically for additional enforcement, if you will, not only in the public areas along Rehoboth Avenue and the Business District, Wilmington, Baltimore Avenues, but also on the boardwalk. It's very important that officers are visible, and they're not only for informational purposes, but to make the community feel safe. So there's 8 additional officers incorporated in the budget from 24 to 32
That's seasonals.
seasonal officers. The Beach Patrol captain has requested 2 seasonal compliance officers, I'll call them. So they would actually not be lifeguards, but they are, because of the regulations that we've instituted over the past 5 years with smoking, with the tent ordinance, it's necessary to have 2 additional staff members for compliance. They wouldn't necessarily be working at the same time, but, you know, there's overlap, there's time off, there's days off. The Parks Department, we actually have instituted this already, but we found a very conscientious individual who has background in the Parks Department from his prior business dealings, and he's actually a professional in the business. He's retired, and he's been working as a seasonal, full-time staff person, and I've incorporated that now into next year's budget. So this is somebody, we still have 2 summer staff members who help out in the Parks Department, because you'll recall that we've taken all of that outside mowing in-house. So Commissioner Calusi might recall that we did have an outside, 2 actually outside folks doing that. One left to do other work, and one retired.
So Sharon, that's a +1 seasonal or full-time?
So it's
In
a
parks.
full-time seasonal. So he's
Full-time
actually working, no, I'm sorry, he's a part-time,
All year round.
year-round person, yes. Sorry. And then the Parking Department to institute some of the changes that are coming starting in May, 4 additional seasonal officers. With that said, there's some internal staff that might be moving around and retiring themselves, but we'll have to see as time goes on. I don't think that'll affect the summer, but we need to be prepared for that. And then in the administration department, and included in next year's budget is Mr. Miller as a projects coordinator. Evan is, his stint as a local government fellow is concluding in June. I've said before that, and I think you'll agree with me, as does the entire staff, that Evan has been an asset, not just to the administrative department, but to all departments. Evan is the future of the city here, and I think it's very important to keep him on. So he's incorporated into the
Time
administrative budget.
basis,
Yes.
full-time.
So with that said, I would like to just point out some of the highlights, and you have them up on the screen. I'm presenting a balanced budget to you. And with that, you know, we'll discuss everything that's needed here, but it's very important that you know this budget is balanced, but we've taken great pains to do what we could to not only save and be as frugal as we could within each department. So I meet with all the department heads, and we go through their line items one by one. But what I'm proposing here, in the second highlight here, is a increase of residential trash. We needed to do that in order to balance the budget for
So
additional
are you talking
revenue.
about things we did or we're accomplishing in this budget cycle, or that you want to do in next budget cycle? I'm not clear.
Next year,
Oh,
next fiscal year, because I needed to do that in order to balance the budget. I certainly, that's a recommendation. As you'll see, there's additional revenue sources that are needed to,
So is that on the first page
looked
there,
at.
Sharon? It says highlights? Is that what you're going through right now?
yeah, I'm looking at the second
This?
bullet point,
Oh, I see, okay, I see.
okay?
Thank you.
So a recommendation, again, as the city manager, can make that recommendation to you, but you're the policymakers, and obviously, you'll have to look at the other revenue sources and decide what you want to do there. Because,
Is it in line with most other municipalities or just commercial trash services? Just curious.
for commercial,
No, for the residential trash.
yeah, I mean, I would say that it is, yes,
Okay.
yes. But again, in order to look at the capital improvement plan, you have to do that with the revenues and expenses that we have. And you'll see as we move on here that there's a very big deficit, if you will, to be able to continue with the projects in the 5-year CIP. So I'll highlight the ones that we did put in here, but in order to implement the remaining parts, if you will, of what we did this year and where we need to go in the future, there's a big deficit.
Excuse me, is the CIP in here somewhere, the updated
It
version?
should
Is
be
that
in
at
the back
end
of your
there?
book.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
So the residential trash, I'm recommending to increase by $25 per household, and that would be an annual seasonal rate increase from $250 to $275. And then we have that non-seasonal $250 for the seasonal rate, and then that would increase to $275, and then the non-seasonal, the year-round folks, from $275 to $300. There are no increases in property taxes, wastewater, or water rates. Obviously, you'll be discussing them, but and that's nothing that I would put in myself. Of course, that would be up to the
Sorry, did you say
commissioners.
you came up with a balanced budget without including water or wastewater
Correct,
fee increases?
yes.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
But basically what she said right after that was.
Okay, that's the part I think I
something
missed.
we've got to do, because if you look at this budget, it doesn't have the expenses of the debt servicing.
Okay, gotcha. It doesn't have the
I mean,
expense either.
that's
I
something
gotcha.
that we have to do for the
I
budget.
see, got it. Okay, thank you.
And then, just as we did last year, and of course, this is up for consideration, our 2% raises for individuals, for personnel, and an upgrade to personnel according to the compensation and classification study. So how we did that was there is an increase incorporated into an individual's annual pay. If that increase is, and not including the 2%. So in other words, if that increase is more than 2%, the 2% is not incorporated into their annual pay. So they would just receive the increase that would get them up to the minimum as proposed by the study. That makes sense? Okay.
For the moment, it makes sense.
So you're saying that it's an either or?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, I get it.
correct.
If the compensation study says it's only 1%, then they would be
Right.
compensated at 2%, and vice versa.
And again, most of the capital improvement plan, we can explain by department. Kevin can actually go into depth, which is going to be important for you as we move on here. And if we can just take a look at the CIP for a brief moment, that's in the back of your books. And I wanted to ask, for those of you who received this, was this helpful to you this year? This is the CIP that Evan did. There's photographs.
I would like it.
Yeah, I've got, mine's downstairs.
It's very helpful. I actually printed this off a link that Lisa sent us. And I printed it again because I wanted it complete. If you recall, last year, every time we did a page, some of the pages we did double-sided, and then it didn't fit in here anymore.
So
Yeah.
you don't have an updated one for this year. You will have that. We found that it was a little cumbersome in having you return your books because they're all updated, almost on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis. So what we're going to do this year is we're going to change that up and give you the pages and have you responsible for putting them into your own books, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So you want us to go back to the CIP?
So I did want you to take a look at the CIP. And as you'll see, we have.
This year's proposed CIP? In the back?
And it's under the debt service tab?
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, this is this year's CIP. It should be in the back of your budget
Under
book.
debt service?
Under debt service?
Tab?
No. Okay.
That's
Well,
the last
That's
tab.
what the last
Okay,
tab
yes,
is.
yes.
Yeah, debt service is right in front of it. Right.
Okay,
So it's just a placeholder.
just a
kind of.
place for it, okay. It's going to live behind that tab, okay.
So the important part of this is that we have quite a considerable capital improvement plan for this year. We'll explain that by department. The green highlighted line items are the ones that are currently, the only ones that are currently in the budget. So page 1, you have the merge wayfinding. We can fine tune that based on this morning's conversation.
Obviously.
We see major omissions here that we thought were going to be in the CIP that aren't in here. Do you want us to talk to you about those now or at the end of your discussion?
Well, that's why I'm bringing them up now, because it's important for you to know why they didn't get in here. So we can talk about them now, or we can talk about
Well,
them
the
later.
one that I've been talking about for 2 years is North Rehoboth. There's no drainage system on Kent or on Kent Street or 4th Street, and I was told it would be put in here this year, so I'm just wondering where that is. Is it in
So-
there and I'm just missing it maybe?
No, they're all in here,
Okay.
but they're not incorporated into the budget because the funding was not there.
Is it a line item in here? I just wanted to
Yes.
point them out as I was
Yes.
thinking about it.
Things are the only things that are in the budget.
Right, but just in terms of the wish list, I know we're nowhere near including, or,
None of them are.
yeah,
It's just the colored ones.
but I don't even see the wish list in total here. That's why I'm just asking. If there's something not here, should we mention it to you now? That's my question.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm mentioning that the Kent Street, 4th Street, North Rehoboth, where there was found to be absolutely no drainage system actually built in to the infrastructure.
Line 26.
Okay.
So,
It's 1st Street, so I'm talking about Kent and 4th.
well, that plays into it. So
Okay.
let me just say that what was done this year was the design for that by, Bob Palmer did that, right?
Yeah, if I could just,
Sure. Yeah,
one
please,
small
please.
difference. I think the area you're talking about, Commissioner, are the Dover, Kent,
Not Dover, Kent and
Sussex,
Forth and Sussex.
that area,
Yeah.
there is no storm
There's
drain.
no storm drains, yeah.
Right, so we have a number in our engineering budget within the department
Okay,
to do the study for that.
okay,
next year.
gotcha.
So it
it's
doesn't
part of
reflect
your
as a
normal-
CIP because it's more of a planning thing,
Gotcha,
as
okay.
opposed to a project.
Thank you, that is very
So our
helpful.
first stage would be to do the analysis, is there something that can be done?
Okay.
We've got that in the individual department budget.
Okay.
In the engineering line.
Great.
And then if it develops as, yes, we can do this, here's an estimate for the design, here's an estimate for the construction, then we would add that to the CIP.
Okay, that is incredibly helpful. Thank you, thank you.
But
Really
the First Street drainage,
Yes, First Street's in.
what was that part, that side of the city?
Correct.
That also plays into this.
Gotcha.
So you'll recall that we put that, we did that
Yep.
design this year.
Yes, okay.
Might have even seen
Great.
them outside your house there, working on some stuff.
And just kudos, Park Avenue, Second Street, and what's the other one? Oh, the paving projects. Kudos to you. I mean, it's just great to see where we had planning last year and really good execution this year of those projects. I just wanted to point that out to you. So thanks, Kevin and Sharon. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about my street. I'm talking about all of North Rehoboth. My street doesn't need anything, okay? I'm talking about North Rehoboth. I want to be absolutely clear.
The other part of the CIP that I consider to be mandatory is lines 48 through 53 that are highlighted in the parking department because they are the replacement meters for the ones, you'll recall, we leased for 3 years and that lease has been concluded. So we need to replace those meters in order to function properly and continue our revenue stream. And we can talk about that more as we get into that department. So basically, those two highlighted areas are what we have included in the budget.
And the two highlighted areas being,
The merge,
Okay.
wayfinding, and the parking meters. So we have over a $4.5 million capital improvement plan that exists right now that I'm saying the funding is not in place for. So we need to find out how to do that. If not all of it, some of it.
What is the highlighted orange? Is that a particular?
it's 77 through 81.
That is the electrical upgrades in the wastewater department, that phase 2 of the electrical components that is we're responsible for it, but it's within, we're paying the county for that.
Yeah, it's
So-
based on a debt to the county. We've got a debt to the county for 10 years at 0% for $3 million.
So, okay, so essentially, the debt service for that is in here somewhere.
The debt service is in the budget.
And that's why those numbers were removed from the total at the bottom for the wastewater department. So you'll see it's 639,000. So those numbers were not included for the CIP purpose.
Got it.
So that's a general overall view. If you'd like to get into the departments, Kevin can talk about the Public Works departments, the Streets Department, mainly because they lend itself to the CIP, and that's where most of the infrastructure improvements lie. Of course, the water and the wastewater, Kevin can also address. If you'd like to get into that now, or Chief Banks is here, he can talk about his budget.
So just to be clear, on the CIP, there's approximately $5.5 million of things to do in here, and you're highlighting 511,000, which is, and that 511 is built into our budget, but the other 4.9 million is not. So a lot of the things that we looked into on the CIP last year to put in for this year are not there. If you wouldn't mind, before we go in further or to questions, if we can go back to that front page that you had your little highlights on.
Mayor, before you get to the front page, What line were you in when you said 5.5 million?
It's all the way down at the bottom, the last page.
Right.
See 4.9 and 511?
Got it. Thank you.
511 is included in the budget. You can see that on this front page.
Okay.
But the 4.9 are things on the CIP for 2020 that are not
We don't
included.
have, okay.
And that 4.9 number does include the 511, 954. I just
Oh, it
pulled
does?
that out.
Oh,
yes.
okay. So it was 4.9 total, 511's in there.
Yes, yep.
But what I just wanted to highlight is on this first page, and this is the one, it's got the blue lines. If you notice, and this is based on your budget with that 511 in there, only 511 in the capital improvement. And what I want everybody to see too is, if you really think about it, if we just look at the general fund is, expenses are over revenue by $569,000. And that's made up by the surplus in the water fund and surplus in the wastewater fund, which is basically how a lot of our budgets have been balanced over the last number of years or so. And the reason I bring this up is because, you know, as we were going into Saturday's discussion, there were a number of people in the, not in the audience, but some of the letters that said that the wastewater treatment plant is a cash cow. And honestly, if you look back, and it's in the Abrahams report, and you look back on 2013 through 18, and the wastewater fund, the wastewater revenues versus expenses, it averaged about a $500,000, $550,000 surplus each of those years. Well, an awful lot of that money, just about every year, went into the general fund to balance it. And so, yes, it was a cash cow, but that's because we've raised rates recently. I don't know the last time, but more importantly, because we have no debt service whatsoever. And that's, if you look at the rates that Abraham's put in front of us, the 580 average to 930 average, that basically brings that surplus in the wastewater probably in the neighborhood of $50,000, which is kind of a better thing to use. But we will no longer have that, even with us raising those rates, say it's 60%, we'll no longer have that surplus that we've had in the past.
I remember back years ago when we started increasing the sewer rates, that money was supposed to be there for the future. And I have to say, I am really disappointed that how many millions, probably like $5 million is gone just to balance the budget, to just use that for the balancing the budget when it should have stayed in the wastewater.
I mean, and I'm not trying to blame anybody in the past, but I'm just saying as we
It's
focus
just
on
a
the
reality
future.
we're facing.
Yeah, and it's things that we're facing as we go forward. And so, as I look further down the page, you talked about the 2%, you talked about the $25. No increases in property tax, wastewater, and water. That's basically because we haven't talked about what we're going to do. And the wastewater revenue from Dewey, Henlopen and Acres, North Shores increased basically of cost allocations. And the outfall debt service for one payment is included here. And that's one payment of P&I, and that's what we're expecting, that at some point in the year before the end of the year, because we've been paying interest on the debt from the SRF, if I'm correct, but not having to pay principal because we haven't taken out all of our line of credit. So that's, at some point in time, and that's what Bert's put in there for one of the two payments,
Are the
semi-annual
two
payments.
major, oh, sorry, Mayor. Are the two major debt repayments, the City Hall and the Ocean Outfall wastewater plant,
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
that adds up,
Okay.
when it's all said and done, I think the 70 million. We
Okay.
haven't borrowed all of it on the outfall, but we
Okay.
have borrowed it all on the.
About 70 million in
city.
debt, okay.
Well, they're the
Thank you.
major ones, but we also have, go ahead, Bert, we have Schoolview.
Yeah, I mean, we have some other little ones still outstanding.
Okay.
Schoolview debt service is $57,000 a year. So
Okay.
it's relatively small. The outstanding balance it was originally $450,000. I think we're down to
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
It's under a
the other
million, yeah.
payment, we have the Lynch well, and that's $173,000 semi-annually. That was originally a $5 million loan.
Oh, okay.
And through the state, and it's down to um, we're in the $2-3 million area.
Okay. Oh, okay. What was that for, just?
That was to build
not
the Lynch
familiar.
well.
Okay.
And,
Where's the Lynch Well, out by Iron City?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, right by Iron City. And then the other one, School View, was the sewer project in the School View area that was
That's right.
done.
There were some
couple,
issues
3
out
years
there
ago.
with
Okay.
the existing infrastructure and had to be addressed.
Okay. So just that's the only debt we have is, I mean, not only, I mean, $70 million, not an only, but I mean, that's the four elements of debt.
Your
Okay.
largest piece of debt is
Okay.
the City Hall project.
Yeah. That's the largest, okay, thanks.
Excuse me. Do I remember correctly that at some point there was a loan that we had that was going to be paid off that had a pretty healthy, somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 payment? Did I make,
I think.
what am I thinking of?
Well, originally there was a loan taken out for the completion of the streetscape project, and that ran over when they did the streetscape, and that's been paid off. So, and I want to correct what I said. You know, now the largest loan we have is in the wastewater department. The City Hall loan is down below 18 million now.
Thank you.
Bert, last year you provide us a chart with all the debt on it? Update that maybe?
I will update that.
Thank you.
And you'll notice this year's budget is in the Munis format. So that's because we're now more comfortable than we were last year. Bert's worked a great deal on that for the past 3 years and continues to work on that. And but that's the reason why you have the Munis format in your books this year.
Thank you.
So I think, actually, because Chief Banks is here and Tammy Ketterman's here, the dispatch supervisor, that maybe if you wouldn't mind, they could start off and talk about their budget. I'm happy to say that there are, other than vehicles this year, there's not any elements in the CIP in your budget. Small amount, yes. So is that okay with the commissioners?
Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you turn to the police tab. Chief, I think you were in the room when I mentioned that the increase of
Over here.
8 additional seasonal officers.
Yes.
Yep. So you can start off by explaining the reasoning for that, as we wanted
As
more
City Manager
visibility.
mentioned, in the past, for last 5-6 years, we had 24 summer officers. Previously, we were up to 32, and we started scaling them back. Sat in several different meetings with city manager, mayor, different commissioners and committees, talking about the perception of the boardwalk late at night. You know, did we have some crime? Well, the statistics in our arrest does not show that there's an increase of crime. It's actually showing that it's gone down. But at the end of the day, perception is reality. So because this was brought to our attention, we're looking at some things such as cameras in the future, but we're not there yet, as well as maybe addressing some lighting issues down on the boardwalk at different ends. But with that, we're going to bring a presence of additional officers. We said 8. I believe that would put, because of days off and things, be able to put 4 additional officers during each shift through the entire 7 days versus last year. I reallocated some personnel, and we have better coverage on the weekends at night, but we did not have, because of that, we lost like Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, because they had to have days off. So by these 8 additional summer officers, we'll be able to just keep them right up on the boardwalk at night. Again, it's more just to, for a perception and to be up there, because I don't feel that there is a real crime activity up there. But that's okay, because with them being up there, we're ambassadors to the city. Again, it goes back about being clean, safe, and friendly. We can help out with, letting people know about parking or new laws or anything that's going on out there, or directions, where to get to here or there, or any medical assistance after lifeguards are off and things. So that will all play a factor. So that's why we are asking for the 8 additional.
And would that be primarily in the evening?
Yes, we're probably looking at about 4 to midnight, somewhere in there. Typically, my summer officers are on 12-hour shifts. These, after again talking in with yourself and visiting the other committees, I'm going to keep those 8 on 8-hour shifts. So they'll be supervised by the administrative staff, and therefore we'll get 5 out of 7 days versus how the other it goes 12-hour shifts gets cut down. So I think we'll get more out there during peak times.
And
Chief, what's
those salaries included currently in this budget?
Yes.
The salaries are
It amounts
just,
to about $68,000.
okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure they were in there.
Yes, and because of the other thing I heard in the past with the summer officers, we added another day's training, which adds up a little bit, just very small increase in that, because we're going to really focus one day just solid on city ordinances. We do that now, but really hit about, with lifeguards included, tent ordinances and smoking and what's expected of that. So there's no discrepancy, that we're consistent and fair throughout. And as the manager mentioned earlier with the lifeguards, working with them. And, not against it. We're all a team here to work together and make sure it's being enforced. By, hopefully just giving warnings and education out there.
Can you cite the statistics? One of the things last year that we talked about, Chief, and I commend you for what I see as really good progress, but last year when we talked about kind of this vision of clean, safe, and hospitable, we had mentioned, well, boy, it seems like the seasonal officers are really focusing on tickets for bicyclists, and I know you kind of looked at that situation. Can you just tell us real quick the results of that? And
Yeah,
kind of-
I didn't bring the stats with me, so I don't
fine.
want to just lock myself into a number, but let's
Generally.
just say if we had 600 bicycle arrests previous years, on average, it was down to just low 100 and some. It was significantly down, a lot more warnings. When it comes to bicycles, we gave out a lot of bicycle lights. If they didn't have a light, we actually took the time off to give them one, but we installed it for them. Hand out a lot more literature. Again, a lot of the reason why the laws went down, we always have discretion, but the state law did change with the bicyclists, where they can actually, they don't have to make a complete stop at a stop sign, or they can go through as long as it's safe. How the law is written, quite honestly, as long as they don't get hit, it's basically they went through safely. If a car or something doesn't have to slam on the brakes, and some other bicycle rules went in that effect. Again, I think we've always been
And
very.
was there any associated increase in safety incidents or anything?
No, that actually went down this year too, even
you.
with that being said, as far as accidents, bicycle accidents, mopeds, as well as pedestrians too, all went down on boardwalk as well as on the streets.
And I know it's hard to quantify when we talk about, clean, safe, the hospitality part of that. That to me just absolutely exemplifies, at least when I think of the vision of hospitality, that actually exemplifies it, though. Thank you.
It is, exactly. Thank you. And I will agree with that statement. And we really worked hard with giving a lot more warnings and information out. I know the city manager put in a budget last year monies for pamphlets and stuff that we were handing out anytime we gave out warnings. And we made sure to just give them something about what our rules are.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, on the additional seasonal officers, what's your confidence level that you'll be able to actually hire them? Are they out there to be hired?
You see it on the news as far as especially full-time officers, that it's getting harder all the time. I think we bring something very unique here in Rehoboth Beach as far as what we can offer them. I mean, housing is always going to be an issue. So once people start applying, it gets very expensive, and the colleges are starting up so much earlier. But yes, by the amount of applications I've received so far, I believe we're on par to not have an issue with that. I mean, it could stop right away. We've been making our rounds to local colleges and giving talks to them in state as well as tri-state area, trying to bring people in. So I don't see that as a problem. Where we get into the issue is about how soon they have to leave. Colleges seem to be getting out earlier, and especially if you play a sport or something that they're going back in. And a lot of these kids that we hire are public safety age for their college, and they have to be in when the freshmen move in. And as we all know, freshmen at colleges move in early. So early August is, I'm losing a lot of them more quickly than ever. But I guess to answer the question, I think we'll get these positions filled.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, will the new seasonal officers, and I'm certainly supportive of that, be able to then offset the overtime
Yeah, ironically, the overtime, when you see that, actually just becomes down to something the city put in years ago with holiday, that they get just a little bit extra on holidays when they're in. Because each one of my seasonal officers, I do something very unique with them. And they work 80 hours every 2 weeks, and if they happen to go over 1 hour because of court or I need to hold over, sometime in that 2-week pay period, I take that back from them. So it stays at 80 hours. So it's really no overtime for a seasonal officer.
So it's really a wash.
Yeah, the only exception I would say is that last night before payroll Sunday, they had to stay over, and they worked. There's no other days to get them off the hour or two they had to stay over. But they have court. We make sure that we get it off the shift commander within that 2 weeks. So the money that you see really comes down to like if it's a 4th of July working or something, where the cities just kind of put in their package.
Chief, I know you'll mention the school resource officer, if you can
Yes.
just talk about that.
Yes, I was going to bring up one thing we're putting in with the new school out here for a full-time officer is looking at a school resource officer to bring that in. I have met with the principal out here as well as the superintendent of Cape School. Again, I don't want to speak for them. They were going to take it back to their full board and get their thoughts on it. But right now, in contract negotiations last year with the full-time officers were with collective bargaining through the Teamsters, our stats were going up, and they were showing there wasn't more officers and all that add in the coverage because it's kind of a good thing, not necessarily for the criminal, but a lot of people have been here and time off, and we have minimal staffing and all. So, and our key times are during the day, during the summer, as you can imagine, need help. So I thought if we could maybe put in for a school resource out at a school, then in the summertime, we would take that officer and put them out on the shift, a split shift. In other words, help again with overtime, because if someone had to stay over, whatever, that would be the second person, so they could go ahead and leave and pick up the slack. So I'm trying to actually save some money on the full-time officers having to stay over in peak time during the summer, because the split person would do that. Currently, I have one officer that helps out with accreditation during the winter months, and that's what we do. During the summer, we put him on a split shift to try to help out. So now with 4 shifts, I'd have that other person on the opposite. So I think it will help out with the students getting to know us. We're out there now. I think it can be a win-win, and at the same time, be able to have that next officer out on the street and help save out on overtime in the long run and cover.
So the school resource officer funding comes from the city, not from Cape Henlopen?
Correct. Currently with elementary schools or whatever, Cape does not have that. With that being said, I will be looking at COPS more grants and things to help pay for that too. I have reached out to Senator Coon's office or whatever. Right now, there's no, those grants aren't available right now, but they'll come. I can't remember if it's June or September and all, and then we'll sit down and put ourselves into it. Those are drying up some, but what happens with the COPS more grants, usually they pay for everything for 4 years. And then you have to just guarantee that you'll keep the person on and take on the debt after that. And that's the benefits and all. But I think it's a win-win is something that was brought up in contract negotiations, and it's been brought up several times over, and by just the caseload and times off and things. So I think by doing that, there is the initial expense, even without a grant, but you'll see that money's come back just with the overtime.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a couple really quick. Chief, great presentation as always, so thank you for all you do.
I'm just answering
So, a
questions.
quick question, lighting and video, you said there's not an increase or increase, a budget for increased lighting down kind of on the, I guess that would be the south end of the boardwalk. And then I wonder how, Stan, I think your committee recommended video, and is it video on the boardwalk, and is that incorporated in here? I just was curious where that is.
Twofold, it's ongoing discussions. So when I spoke to the mayor and other committees about the perception, and you talk, I know Chamber of Commerce have put different comments and things in Main Street. If you go down there at night, where there are some dark areas, so I think we can adjust our lighting and all that. So I don't think that's necessarily a cost at this point. We have the covers over some of the lights that we might be able to get a little bit brighter. That's just working with Public Works. I think at this point, or at least working with the city manager, if we see that we need something extra in the end. As far as with the cameras and all, definitely that's something I will be pushing. As Evan said earlier, we're looking at some people with some grants. We have reached out and tried to get a price quote from one firm upstate that Max Hamby, with our IT director, has been in contact with. We went and visited and trying to figure out, but again, I think it's a discussion on if we're going to go hardwire or how we're going to do the infrastructure, because as you know, there's not a lot of infrastructure down the boardwalk and get that back. And once we narrow that down, then we will be pursuing you. I know we're in budget talks now, but a lot of it we see is probably a step thing to get there, and looking at some funding. And I'll, with that, each year I get violent crime grant monies. I put in 4, and I'll start, as we did this past year, we bought in-car cameras and body cameras for the officers. And now we'll take the money next time and go towards some of the infrastructure or whatever direction we decide to go. So it is on there, and we are pursuing it, and I would love to have it yesterday, but the reality is with no infrastructure, we're going to have to make some hard choices on which direction to go. And if we go one way, it's probably the right way, but it's going to take longer, and the other way is, more quickly as I would like, but the reality is that may not be right. That's why Max has been involved with all the meetings, along with the city manager.
And Stan, that is the video that you're referring to as one of your top priorities from your committee. That's the same project.
Higher priority than other things, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because
We also, when we make recommendations, we say, we recognize some things you can just budget money and that's it, but some of the things need to be planned for, budgeted, and maybe are a two-step process, because we're recommending the more expensive route, which would be hardwiring, right?
Okay.
And that's working with, again, I'll continue working with Evan and city manager once the decision's made which direction to go, to make sure we start getting some comparable price quotes and to get that out there.
Well, you look at their capital improvement, and you don't have it listed in there, so I would expect at one time you will vet it and sold the city manager on it, if you will.
Correct.
And then it'll be on here at least as a reminder.
Correct. Like I said, we've had several meetings and we've gone outside to talk about one direction to go, at least to have a starting point, because we just didn't have a starting point. Right? So we have had 2 or 3 meetings, I think, that were kind of informal. And like I said, we went upstairs and working on a true price quote now.
Anybody else?
Anyone have any general questions for the chief regarding his operating budget?
The bike shed, is that for out in the, did we pour you a concrete pad out there and we haven't put a building out there yet, or what?
Correct. We have one building out there that's older. That's we've replaced the roof several times. It's leaking. It's not really big enough. It's smaller than the pad was. So we're trying to get one that will fit on the pad, that size that we can use. We're having there's no electric out there currently. It's wired again, because this was just an old shed that we had just didn't have the monies when the project got done. So we made what we had, but there's a lot of issues and a lot of dry rot, and like I said, the roof's been replaced once, and some rafters and some sheathing and all that's come off, and it's been replaced. So we're looking at doing a replace of that.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Just remind me what the WC insurance, is that workman's comp insurance? Looks like that's the one thing that's going up pretty significantly in the budget. Is that accurate, or am I reading this wrong? The 2018 actual, I'm sorry, it's on the second page. I may be reading this wrong. It's the 2018 actual was 89, 2019 is 150K.
Well,
Is
I think
that just-
overall, the city manager's office works on that, but I think it goes across the board with all departments or whatever, so it's probably that. Because actually, I'm very proud that when our representatives come here, whatever and stuff we're working on, actually in the police department, he was just telling me recently, within last month, that ours has gone down as far as what we're putting in and all that, and we really take pride and do follow-up on any injuries and to see if they're preventable for in the future. I know city managers put in a lot of training for all department heads and our employees to make sure we're cognizant of the areas we're working in also. I think in our department, at least the police, and please correct me, city manager, if I'm telling that wrong, but I think at least in the police, ours going down, but it goes across the board for the city as a whole. So I think it's divided up between departments.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the same
Yeah.
budget it was for 18.
Well, not the actual went
No,
down for
the
some
budget
reason. Yeah, the
for
budget.
18. Budget for 19.
Is there a reason though it's about the same as it was in the past years? And then 89 or 2018 went down the final and then, okay.
And that is a-
That was just an anomaly. Okay, thank you.
what happens is
Yeah.
we're in a pool, and
Yep.
we often get a refund. In the last few years, we've
Oh,
gotten
okay.
a refund against that.
And how much was that refund?
Okay.
It was
Sharon wants you to highlight that.
significant.
Yeah, it looks like
So,
it, yeah.
I say that not to put you on the spot,
Oh,
Bert,
I
but it was
see.
significant.
That's
It was
actually good.
several hundreds of thousands
Wow,
of dollars.
really?
So it's good to be in that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
pool
yeah,
with
no,
other
that's a good thing.
communities.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah, any specific questions about budget? I know I won't bore you with every line item and all that, but I think the city manager will attest that in a lot of my areas, even in dispatch center has gone down too. And like I said, Tammy Ketterman, communication supervisor, is here if you have any specific questions for her department. I will give her kudos because when she submitted hers, the line item by line item, a lot of them had decreased. So it's always good. So I can go to the city manager and say that it's gone down on that.
While Tammy's here, would you mind just giving a little brief synopsis of the training opportunities that you've taken advantage of in your department, and how, frankly, Ms. Ketterman has not only modernized the dispatch center there, but has made it fully accredited to where we do receive recognition for that.
Yeah, Tammy can talk about when we're dispatching, we are doing just ambulance protocols now. We're doing police and fire or whatever. And actually, we're going to be very unique in the state of Delaware that we're actually leading the charge.
We're talking about the 911 center, right? That's just for Rehoboth, or is that for the county?
That's ours.
Just
It's-
ours?
For fire and EMS, we have a 36 square mile district. Goes all the way out to Angola and to the south of Indian River Inlet Bridge. So that's our dispatch for fire and EMS. Of course, the police is just this 1 square mile in the city of Rehoboth. For years, and I'm going to say about 1999, we've been medically accredited with the National Academy out of Utah. That's statewide requirement to be a 911 center. Last year, I took it upon myself to get us fire protocols so that when they call here or Sussex County fire and EMS, they get the same questions from the same exact questions in the same exact order. You're not going to call 911 now anywhere in the state and get different questions. Everybody follows the protocol. Seaford came on board in December. So now anywhere in the state of Delaware, we all do police, fire, and EMS. The state of Delaware 911 board did pay for the police protocols. We requested it as managers, and they approved it, so they paid for the whole state. We happen to be the first ones in the state to go to it. Kent County is going to go to it in February, and Newcastle will be probably May. So Now, when you call 911 anywhere in the state, you're going to get the same exact questions in the same exact order. We all did it about the same, but this is, and it's going to be, we're going to be accredited. My goal is by December is to be the first tri-accredited center in the state of Delaware. That's my goal. So it's not an easy task, but that's my goal by December of 2019 to be tri-accredited, to go along with our CALIA with the police department.
Not to interrupt Tammy, I'm sorry, but I think something else is very important, have this captive audience, is our dispatchers, how fortunate we are to have them. Every call that now they're accredited in those, but EMS, and now it'd be police and fire, have to get graded and looked at. And they have to have over 98% compliance, or they're out of a job or whatever. So we're at the highest level possible or whatever we're going on compliance. And you have to remember, as you said, the 36 square miles, you get a car accident on Route 1, everybody has a cell phone, we could be getting 10, 15, 20 calls on one, and we're getting that information out, so therefore our fire department can go, as well as because of our dispatch center. It's the time I always brag on why we need them. The police department goes on every call that's in town here, so other towns don't get that because we're dispatching it, and we have silent dispatch and all that. We know where we need to go, so if one of you call 911 or whatever, or you slipped and fell or whatever, or a partner or something's ill, and we're sending an ambulance, the police is going to go there too. And a lot of times, with their training, they can start things way before the ambulance can even get there, or fire trucks.
That's a great benefit.
I'm sorry, Tammy, I just want to pass on that.
Fine.
Tammy, do you have any comment on the new facility? Is it an improvement?
Oh, it's amazing. I can't, I don't even have a word for it. It's amazing. It's roomy, it's nice and clean. I actually have my dispatchers Swiffer it every night, and then they have to mop it every morning. Even though we have the cleaners, that's just my thing. But it is amazing, and we do like it, and it's a lot better, a lot roomier.
Thank you for taking care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
In the capital improvement program, you got radio replacement and desktop computers. And desktop computers, it has in parentheses 911 funds. Is that actually paid for through, so that's a $15,000 that we don't have to come up with?
That's correct, but I put it on there so the city can see where we're getting the new computers from. It's actually the fund that we receive from the state. We get a deposit every month from the state for the 227, 226, and the cell phones in this area. And I actually did try this year to get it up a little bit, but that didn't work out too well. So county's not giving it up. But so that fund pays for most of our equipment. That fund paid for our chairs that I have over there, and it pays for our monitors. So I use it sparingly. It also can help me on my training. If I have some and then I'm going to go over budget on my training, I can just tell them to take it out of my 911 funds because it covers that also.
And most of the training does come out of 911. Tammy, I think City Manager, when you just briefly say about your training where you have to go and get accredited, and we have our dispatchers, certified trainers and
Yes.
Q callers, that's all paid through out of this money.
Anything else?
This is more from the revenue perspective, Sharon. So we service a 36 square mile area for the fire. Do we get any funds from anywhere? Is it all just city paid for?
Well, the fire department itself has
Right.
they have their own capital campaign, but no.
Well, that's what the 911 monies are. On every phone bill, you get a Verizon surcharge says 911, and all that is what's coming here. It actually goes to the county, and because what legal contract was into, it depends, and we get a percentage of that based on our cell phone towers and hard lines, because most people are going away from hard lines. You get a portion of that. So the different PSAPs, there's 9 in the state of Delaware, and we're one of them. So Seaford gets a portion of that, but all the checks are divvied by the county. that's what Tammy was just talking about. She tried getting the county to raise that
Right,
money
right.
up or whatever, and us get more money from that. And maybe something that at some point in the future, the city manager, mayor, whatever, may want to look back into and talk to the county administrator. And I don't know if there's any wiggle room, but that is the money that we get monthly, is it, or quarterly? Monthly that comes in or whatever, and that helps offset the furniture. The new building that we're in now, the 911 center, is talked about. Some of that money was taken out of that to put in the console, help with the consoles and the floor and all that stuff. So it all goes directly to that 911 center.
Okay,
But specifically from other municipalities now.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon, while the next group's coming up, I just had a general question. I just noticed it here. Maybe you mentioned this and I just missed it. On the top on the header, it says projection revised placing includes singer recommendations. Does that just mean you've incorporated the compensation into every department?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
was it did you include in the budget all the funding to bring everybody up to the recommended level, or you're phasing it in over time?
Up to the
Can you remind
minimum
me?
level.
So everybody's coming up to the minimum level
Well,
in this budget?
all of those individuals that were included in that. That wasn't everyone.
Okay, so everybody, if we approve this budget as is and everything, would be up to the minimum level?
Correct.
Okay, good. Oh, that's
Yes.
great. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. And IT Director Max Hamby is here. If you can spend a few minutes talking to how our systems run here, the very important systems. Max, do you want to highlight on, I think, since you were a huge part of making this building what it is, if you can just highlight, not really the technical components, but how you feel these systems are running and what you've done to accommodate that.
So without getting too technical about it, it's been over the past, I'd say 5 or 6 years that I've been here, it's been, increasing our presence in the other departments, lending our support, partnering with those other departments to provide what they need the most, as well as, identifying some priorities for us. Things like the camera systems have been a high priority for us, the door access controls for here. Certainly Munis, as we rolled that out into the different departments, has been a great equalizer, I think, for the transparency of information between the administrative side of the city, but filtering that out into the different departments. Things which sound very simple, but just being able to see your actual budget to that day, it's important, and things that we hadn't been able to do prior to that. But once again, as we've rolled that information out to people and provided them more capabilities in their departments, certainly we see as they take hold, we drive our data use up. So we've had to expand our data capacity. We're obviously keeping up to date with our computers and our software, and once again, I'm trying not to make it too technical, but but unless there's, if you have any specific questions,
So in the CIP, on line 133, it says total IT, and it says 73,100, but when I look under the IT tab, I don't see that broken out anywhere. Am I missing something?
Unfortunately, I didn't put this together, so what line were you talking about?
The IT tab in the budget book. So again, going back to the CIP document, only the items that were highlighted in green were included in the Munis report for the budget book. So if that's what you're looking at, the 9,900 line item, the capital outlay, there's 0 in there right now because that was not one of the projects, or those
Okay,
projects
but
were not included.
the 73,100 that is slated for this year, I don't know what those things are. Am I missing something? Total IT.
Oh, you're looking at the total. Go up higher and find the,
I did, and there's zero there because he said they don't, it's not included, but I'm just wondering what that $73,000 is.
very bad.
No, that is.
Last page, yeah.
Yeah, these are them.
Oh,
We're looking at line
On the- on
133
133.
in the capital improvement.
133? I have 111.
2011.
Capital budget.
The very bottom.
So those are items, obviously, that we've, you know,
All right.
Oh, I see.
I missed it. I thought it was the water
number.
department.
Same
Just the way
number.
it rolled off, I thought, where is this? Okay, never mind. Thank you.
I have two questions, Max, so thank you for your overview. I just kind of want to understand kind of your department, just the scope of it, just so I can ask the right questions. Is your department responsible also for looking at, how do I phrase it, maybe citywide external services? So for example, putting in place, does your department look at like, how can we put in place free Wi-Fi? I'm not saying we want to do it or we're going to do it or we budget. I'm just saying conceptually, should we and can we and how would we put in place citywide free Wi-Fi for everybody? Is your department responsible for that type of, outlook for the city overall?
certainly. I mean,
Okay.
you know, we bring things to the table such as looking at, as we open up roads, we want to put fiber down or at least
Okay.
put down conduit to
Okay.
provide for that. Certainly, there's been some challenges to that. Typically a little late finding out.
Yeah.
So we haven't made much progress to that, but certainly those are things that we look at that we feel the city needs to better position themselves in.
Okay.
But yes, that would be our department.
Okay, I don't have a question on that right now, but I was just wondering if that's kind of part of your scope. And my more tactical, specific question is, I said this last year, but I think the move to Office 365 is outstanding. It's a best practice, and it seems to be working pretty well from my perspective. But there's also a lot of capabilities within Office 365 that, I know we're in our second year of rolling this out, I think, second or third, that we really could be, I think, maybe capitalizing on more, like the use of SharePoint and, the use of the cloud for storage and sharing and all that. Is that something that you would put in your budget, like training for, the employees and maybe commissioners on how we could, put in place processes to better use some of those capabilities?
Certainly we can. Right now, we have, we have a lot of people at different levels,
Yeah, still.
capabilities.
Okay.
We do have an internal training system or program. It's probably not as much as we need to. Once again, we have a certain amount of staff, and those staff are very busy. So it's hard to get them away from that. And as we pull them away, that pushes other things down the road. So, but we do have a training program. We do train our internal employees. If we need to provide more specialized training, we can certainly do that, whether that be from my staff or bring a consultant in. I know we've talked previously about the SharePoint.
Yeah.
And I know that there are,
If it makes business sense, I don't even know if it does. I'm just kind of
Absolutely.
wondering, yeah.
from one standpoint, we have a small staff as well. I have a small staff as well. So, there is a plethora of tools that are available to us, and we want to make sure that we're strategically using the best one for whatever approach we do. I don't want to I don't want to reach out and grasp at something that I think is going to be a good tool, then further on down the line find out that it's not. So we're a little bit. My goal is not to be bleeding edge, more cutting edge. If you catch my meaning.
I do.
But things like SharePoint, as a government entity, we are in a different cloud than most private businesses, and therefore we are on a different track as to what's available to us. because they're very sensitive to the government cloud and the compliance issues that they have. So we have recently gotten SharePoint available to us. Microsoft Teams is really what they're positioning as that service on Office 365. So it's something that we're looking at right now, and we'll be.
I know Munis was your priority this year.
Correct.
So for your small team, but okay, thank you. You answered
So
my
Max,
questions.
the 73,000, those are unfunded projects?
That's what I'm finding out. There are things that we want to do, things we feel are essential, and.
So just from
we
a
don't have
process
funding yet.
standpoint, that's a different section of budget discussion that we will get to later.
Well,
Is that a yes or a?
I think a definite, I mean, I just wrote in essential there because we've got essentials in other places, but as I mentioned before, the budget is balanced and our CIP is minimal. A lot of the things that we wanted to do last year, we put off to this year, and, you know, like street paving and CCT cameras in the sewers and stuff is not in the budget. I mean, so these things that are not in the budget but in the CIP are things that we're going to have to discuss as we move forward before we finalize the budget, because we have to find money.
So for every dollar of the $4.x million of things in here, we've got to come up with new funding sources for those.
Right. So the copier replacements, those are a purchase, right? Purchase, not a lease. Is that right?
That's correct.
Have we ever explored leasing, or does it not make sense for?
We've explored leasing. It just really, it doesn't produce anything for us. Typically, you know, in a private industry, I would say, you know, I can point to the tax benefits. We don't get those here. I know Bert has looked at leasing before, and I've explored that with our vendors as well, and we just don't seem to get any kind of real benefit to that.
Okay. And so this, can you tell me what the streets department cameras are? What is that?
So we've had an issue in the past with people doing illegal dumping. They pull up in front of the Public Works Department and kind of throw a couch out in front of the gate and then drive off. So much like what we've done at the recycling center this past year, we have cameras there to identify that, so we can catch license plates, vehicle make and models. Plus we're monitoring the yard itself. Our intent is to do that at the Public Works Department as well, which includes our fuel systems.
And the portable radios are?
They are actually for Public Works as well. We have a repeater for them. We're moving away from although we still have them, we find that we're moving away from the car-mounted, the in-dash radios, to a portable. So as we have a team of 2 or 3 people go out, you know, they're not in a truck, they can have a radio on them.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I just again want to compliment Sharon on this CIP. You know, I've fought for this for many, many, many years, and I just think it's great. You know, the first time that we ever came out with one through the previous city manager, it was not vetted. It literally had every wish list item that every department wanted. And so I'm glad to see this priority level here. And I guess one of my questions is, they're listed as essential and desirable. There used to be a third level, I think, at one time. What was that third? Preferable or something.
Deferrable. I could see a deferrable one.
Deferrable. Well, who makes that determination? By the time these are written on here, has the city manager sat with them and vetted them? So you're the one that is determined essential and desirable. So do you have, so I think it's important for us to look at all the essentials first, perhaps, and then the desirables afterwards. Do you have a total by any chance of, keep us from having to add up what the desirables total and what the essentials total for 2020?
We can do that. Can we get back to you in a
Okay,
couple of
yeah,
minutes with that?
Yeah. I'm being mindful of that sheet you did last year that I thought was very helpful.
I mean, maybe we can have that.
Breaking them out, showing us what's essential, and then we had to figure out
you could take. Yeah, I think we could probably have that for the next budget meeting, to have two different columns, essential versus desirable. But, I mean, I think if we look down here and just kind of cover up the desirables, the essentials kind of stick out a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean-
most of the desirables seem smaller, with the exception of the boardwalk restroom rehab.
Right.
But, I mean, there's a lot of things, whether there's storm sewers, the citywide paving, Bayard, Lake Avenue, North First Street. Those are pretty big numbers that, again, we spoke about pretty heavily last year. And, you know, we were hoping to continue to move that in the right direction this year.
I do see two deferrable. Does that mean that they're essential but not for this year? Is that what that means? I found, so line 29 and 30 are deferrable. Does it mean that they really are essential, just not for this year?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why you don't see anything in 2020.
Well, that's what I was assuming, but wanted to confirm.
Yeah, because, you know, some of these things are, I think, sometimes it's difficult to figure out exactly 3 and 4 and 5 years on out. And so they're like, these are things that have been put off for so long. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's probably why a lot of these desirables and essentials are in 20 and 21, because they were in 19 and 20 last year, and they're probably in 18 and 19 the year before. But these are,
Okay,
you know, things.
thank you.
Well, you know me, I'm technical. I'd love to go through each one of these one at a time and perhaps we can do that, but on an accelerated basis. You don't need to get into details. However, when we get to certain things like boardwalk restroom rehab and shower conversion, that I think needs a little more clarification. Access mats don't need much time, so you don't have to be fearful about going over them one at a time. I don't think it's going to take that long.
We're prepared for you, Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, as we focus on something like that, can you prepare something that your group kind of, like, obviously here it's about 4.5 million that are anywhere from desirable to essential. Maybe pull out, you know, I don't know how you have prioritized everything that's essential to 1, 2, and 3, but things like that we, based on your professional knowledge and your staff, feel like we got to figure something out.
So, yes, and what comes to mind, obviously, is Lake Avenue Phase 2. $200,000 for Lake Avenue Phase 2 is not in here. To me, we need to come up with that $200,000. We're in line to get $800,000 from the TAP grant, and the city needs to provide that 20%. So we need to continue with that.
800 doesn't come without the 200.
That's right. And there are, and we're actually going to go into that next with Kevin. So we did much this year, in this fiscal year, for, and the streets department, you'll see, is a bulk of that, almost $5 million, $2.5 million. So we need to continue with, you know, many components of that, because otherwise the study sits on a shelf and the stormwater doesn't get corrected. You know, everything that, you know, I've heard from the commissioners and also your constituents, and the time that I spend going out to people's houses and, you know, why is my street always flooding? And so that's the kind of thing that we need to pay attention to. That's what you actually committed to this year, to do the study on it and to have the engineering done on that, but, and the design. So we're going to get into that.
Thank you.
I want to make a comment about the IT budget. When you get to the IT section, some of you might be alarmed when you look at the cell phone and telephone and say, well, why is it going up so much? We changed our process this year, felt that, you know, it was probably a more meaningful number to have the IT department manage this. And so those costs that you see there are really ones that had been previously distributed to all the other departments. And so don't be alarmed if you see it going up from a couple thousand to 50,000. It's not just that department, it's all those departments that they're serving.
Oh, gotcha.
We were having trouble maintaining the inventory, and things would go somewhere else, you know. So, and just for ease of management and tracking, we've assumed the liability of all of them.
So the liability on somebody else's books has disappeared.
Correct, correct. It's all in our budget. So we've done that with the things such as the copiers. You know, it just makes sense to manage it under one umbrella agreement. We've been able to, you know, negotiate more favorable terms rather than manage them, each department managing their one independently. Same thing goes for the phones. Volume speaks, basically.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Max.
Is it okay if we go into the Public Works, the Streets Department? Kevin can explain some of the projects that we have in the pipeline that aren't funded now, but why we need to get them going.
So you want to go into the CIP or you want to go into the Public Works area? on the
Well, if you can
tabs?
start with the Streets Department, that
But
would be.
we'll look at the CIP.
Okay.
First, let me just say to all of you, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in the budget cycle that runs from April 1st until March 30, whatever. It's a first for me. So I may not know what fiscal year we're talking about if you ask a question about a specific project. I've done a lot of budgets, and I never had one run in this period of time. So if you just want to look at, we'll start with the top of their buildings and grounds, and we'll start at the essential. Obviously, the railings for the bandstand, if there's, the railings have been welded about a third, patched about 100 times, and they fall off every spring. So the intent there is just to renew that asset. I'm assuming we want to talk about the boardwalk restroom rehab and shower towers because it's such a significant item, even though we didn't really list it as essential, but as desirable, but it has received a lot of attention. So we did have a consultant come in and look at each of the three major facilities, the two on the boardwalk and the one at Rehoboth Avenue. And they've broken it out in various ways. The total price tag to do a complete renovation on all three at the same time and get that done. I think they were able to get it done this year. It was about $761,000. Obviously, a lot of money. It is broken out by facility and by task within that facility. So, we can kind of run through that individual pieces if, 761 is too much to swallow, or.
I don't know whether we want to address it now or after we do this division list between essentials and desirables, but of course, what I want to hear is, how we're addressing deferred maintenance on everything. The shower stall or stall doors, et cetera, but also family changing room or family restrooms, the baby changing stations and things like that.
Yeah, so if you could go into those
Sure.
things.
So-
Want to do that now or next time is fine.
I would say,
because it's a desirable.
it's a big number, and it's a desirable number that everybody's been talking about. Is it essential to do all three all at once? Maybe not, but you might as well talk to us about what 761,000 is.
So philosophically, what we did was, we obviously got the price tag for the entire complete renovation, upgrade of each of the facilities. We also have within that items that we had discussed already, the shower towers on the board, additional shower towers on the boardwalk, the family rooms, although they're really an easy way to do the room piece, but changing tables, those kinds of things. We have a budget for those, or an estimate for those, that we can provide for individual items that you may or may want to do if we don't want to do the complete renovation.
And that's in the 761. So you could piecemeal those out?
Correct. We have two options. One, hire a contractor to come in and do that. We also have a price to do it in-house. Obviously, a much reduced scale and a much reduced scope, what we can do in-house with regards to painting and changing tables and partitions and mirrors and those kinds of things. But we have, some essential things, bad choice of words, I guess, because we're comparing essential to essential, but we have some of those things that the committee had recommended being done prior to going out and looking at the complete overhaul of the facilities.
So it seems like we really do need that breakout.
So if I might just interject here, because your committee, Commissioner Mills, and the departments also, we took a look at this. We used the resources of EDIS, who did this for us, because they actually just finished doing Lewis's restrooms. And we know those individuals, and they gave us their services, if you will, to help us along here. And we talked about everything from increasing the size of each restroom, if there was available space to do that, looking specifically at the Beach Patrol headquarters and going another floor up and having the Beach Patrol upstairs and increasing the size of the footprint downstairs for storage, but also for the restroom itself to move over into some of that space. And then we took it another step and said, you know what, this is too, we need something immediate. So let's look at a facelift. And what I called it was sprucing up every bathroom, every restroom area. So the spruce up, that is the $760,000. And we can certainly give you the list that they provided to us, from the demolition down to the masonry repairs, the door frames, the toilet partitions. So everything except they called it I know what it is, but I can't think of it right now. So the urinals and the toilets would not be replaced. They're functioning.
I guess what I'm looking for, I thought that was pretty cheap, and so I wasn't sure how much, involved. But what I'm looking for is I would rather plan for the next 3, 4, 5 years and do the proper upgrades rather than throw a lot of money away this next year.
So they also said that if these improvements were made, then the 3, 4, 5-year improvements could be made around this. So there wouldn't be additional money spent on that, because we did ask that question. So
If I had to rank importance, the maintenance to me is, everything's got to be clean and sanitary so that everybody's willing to go in and use the facilities without any exception. And then that family restroom to me personally is one of the biggest things. Dealing with families that need to go in and use a family type restroom where they can't do that now in the men's room. So that I'm hoping you'll continue moving forward with your analysis and planning so that we can consider budgeting into future years.
What percentage of this is the shower towers, or what amount?
Kevin, there's what, 7-foot showers?
Correct.
7 that'll be converted.
Converting to shower towers. I seem to recall it was in the $30,000, $35,000 range.
That's the number.
Right.
That's the labor.
Just,
That's where there were existing
Foot showers, converting to shower
that would
towers.
need to be removed and a tall shower
Shower
tower
tower,
put in.
right.
and the 761,000, am I just missing it somewhere on a line item? Is it, am I not looking at it?
It's in the CIP,
In the CIP
but
number
it's
I'm
not,
looking at the
Buildings
CIP,
and grounds. top.
Line number 3.
3, excuse me.
under building and grounds. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So I'm sorry, is maintenance built in then to your budget and then just the renovations built into the capital, the CIP? Is that what you said?
Yes.
I just missed that. Okay.
Yes, and there may be some
Okay.
crossover, but
And just from a process understanding of the budget documents, if I go back into the budget, there's a whole budget for comfort stations. Is that where the maintenance of the comfort stations? Okay. And then what's the $120,000 for contract services? Is that the full-time people or,
cleaning services.
pardon me, cleaning? Just
cleaning
cleaning that
services.
are there full-time? Okay. And then what's the maintenance of the facilities in the budget? Is there anything for maintenance of the comfort stations right now in the budget?
Maintenance.
Is there a dollar figure for that?
I see building maintenance of 32,000. And what's that, just, again, understanding, what does that basically cover? Okay.
How he breaks out the. line
Gotcha,
items.
okay, all right. Because I'm kind of with Stan on this. I see this as a really big priority. And if that's 761, and I'm back to the CIP line 3, is that the price for doing all 3 upgrades at once? Or could you spread that out over 3 years and still get, the same kind of pricing model out
Be
of
similar.
it? It'd be
Obviously,
similar?
There'd
Okay.
be some cost savings, do it all at one time, just
Yeah.
one management group.
So roughly, if we did spread it out, you could do, I don't know, 300 or 250.
Not exactly the
Okay.
one third, but it's fairly close.
Well, I would take your project list there and divide it into essentials and desirables, because the shower towers could certainly be desirable, but replacing the rusted stall doors and all that, to me, is an essential.
I agree with Stan.
So the question is, do we do everything to be efficient? It would be good to do everything for the 760 rather than just do the rusting parts. Because what they said to us is that if we gave them some kind of indication early on, they could get these restrooms done by May. So, in other words, I can't call them on, assuming you're going to adopt the budget on March 15th, I can't call them on March 16th and say, okay, I can give you a purchase order in April, let's go for May 15th.
Could you put in a contract, I'm sure you could, but like a 3-year contract, a year, 2 options, and then still get the same price, so divide this by 3 and spread it out and have 2 option years? I mean, is that something to,
What Kevin's saying is, you do it all 761 right now, or you can spread it out over 3
Yeah.
years, but over 3 years, it may be closer to 300 a year.
yeah,
And, we could do that with, as we set up the CIP, rather than do 761 in 2020, you do 300 a year, 20, 21, and 22.
Yeah.
And you do one of the units,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Again, I would fight that some of those things are essentials.
I see.
And
Across all
can't
Within the,
and can't be deferred another
That's
2
why
years or
it
3
sounds
years.
like 761 is better than.
Again, you could take
we need a
you could take
breakout.
the 35,000 out of the shower towers
I
if
see.
you had to, and put that, maybe 2 items there. Put that in as a separate item as desirable, and the other one is,
I
That's
agree with
essential.
you. That's why I think we need this broken out into essentials and desirables, because it's a big number. I mean, we have to find the money to fund it. I mean, and there's a lot of competing things, and I think if we had that information, maybe we'll end up spending a little bit more, but at least we can get the things that we feel that are essential done.
Break out that list for the next meeting.
And we will. We have it, so we can certainly provide it.
Sharon, when would a contract have to be put out to have the work completed by May 1, May 15?
Said, like, before, that's what I said, before April.
All right, so they'd need
2 months, 6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks to complete.
That's not real comfortable for
days.
me, but,
Yeah.
so it fits in our normal calendar then, to vote and approve this, allows enough time to then contract
Yep,
it.
no, if we vote like March 15th,
Yeah?
then it's April, May, June. We're probably close to July, or mid-June to have it finished versus May 15th.
I thought I just heard
90
heard
days.
you said, did you say 90 days?
I don't recall saying 90 days. Maybe
I-
Kevin did.
Yeah, I assume, I recall.
I thought I heard that, I thought Dick's question was, to get it finished between May 1st and May 15th, that we can contract it out by April 1st.
So there's 2 things here. The restrooms here, the sprucing up of the restrooms, and the parking meters. I really need an indication very soon knowing that the budget doesn't, isn't finalized until March 15th. But the sprucing up of the restrooms and some confidence level that this is going to proceed. The parking meters are essential. We cannot get parking meters in by the Friday before, the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, unless I have a memorandum of understanding, a letter of commitment from the city to the T2 folks that this is going to go ahead. So that's why I made that essential, and it's part of the CIP. This is a huge rollout of a new system. We have to get folks trained. They have to order it. There's 8-week lead time. They have to install it. Billy Maffei is, very concerned about that. He has to get a concrete contractor in to be able to install the meters on the concrete pad. Different kind of components here. And so what I'm asking is, for some level of confidence to be able to proceed with this, knowing that you don't adopt a budget until March 15th, anything can happen. But I do have to sign, specifically with the parking meters, some kind of commitment.
And that's built into the budget and built into the CIP right now.
Yes.
Whereas the shower, the boardwalk, restrooms is something that we'll have to give you an idea of, yes, go forward. You're asking right now for us to really give you an idea that, yes, we're all behind you with the parking.
Again, not funding it until after the budget is adopted, but being able to go ahead so they can order it.
Whereas the restroom replacements, that's where maybe I got it miscommunicated, the 90 days. I mean, when do you need, if we wanted to do all three at once, to have them done by May 15th?
I recall they said they could get them done. Maybe I missed the 90-day part.
Based on, I thought it was 1 February if they had to go ahead.
Okay.
And that would give February, March, and April. I'd have them done
So
by 1 May,
basically,
and then 2 weeks of.
Yes,
Because we need to close them. We need to think about how we're going to open them on Easter.
plus cold and
You
stuff.
you probably need to sequence closing
Yes.
them too, don't you? Well, we meet essentially every 2 weeks until
Right.
we're finished with this, so.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying,
so,
is if,
maybe, it may be optimistic to think that we can get through this and rank everything by the next meeting, but
and figure
certainly-
out how to pay for it.
certainly within the next couple meetings.
Yeah,
probably.
no question.
Well, is there something up in the air about the meters?
There shouldn't be. I mean, there should be no question that
No,
we need to do it and we should do
I
it.
figured,
That's what I'm thinking,
So-
that's not an essential, that's a absolute must-have, critical infrastructure to our revenue.
Absolutely.
So what's the discussion?
I
Is-
think that's moot. I think we're talking about the bathrooms. We moved on to the
Well, no, she
bathrooms.
just started talking.
No,
you didn't want to
city
replace the
manager wanted-
bathroom, replace the meters by the bathrooms, if we see that as more essential than the meters. I think what we've come up with is the meters are go.
I thought we
And we're
agreed
still
upon that
talking about
at the last, several meetings ago, to be honest. I thought we did.
The meters are a go.
Yeah, I thought meters were a go.
All right.
Who just
So the-
agreed with me?
I think we're all
the
nodding.
meters are a go.
So if
Meters
you
are a
can
go.
break down the restroom stuff for the next meeting, we'll talk about it, and we'll just figure out what it takes at that point in time. I'll keep going, Kevin, sorry.
Smee, did Sharon get her answer on that? I just want to be absolutely
Meters
clear.
are a go, you mean?
Meters are a go. Like, put the agreement in
I'm
place,
emailing them
right?
now.
Okay. I think that's what I
Memorialize
heard. I
that.
don't mean to put any, but I know your parking department was very concerned in December even that we get this done by the first couple weeks of January.
And we
so-
can talk more
Yeah.
about that because there's obviously more
Yeah.
to talk about, because there's a software component to that we need to order this year that will not be in place until the summer of 2020. So we'll have meters, but all of the, and I don't want to confuse you, but all of the permitting that's tied to going up to a meter and getting a permit there, what we talked about to, make this easier for the folks who come in here, doing away with the, our staff that sit on Rehoboth Avenue and Byard Avenue, that comes in 2020, but the physical 48 meters multi-space pay stations need to be ordered.
And you were not clear until right this minute that you can move forward on those.
Correct.
So now you can
I'm very clear.
move forward.
Yes.
I love this. Love that.
Okay.
Great
Want
job.
to keep going, Kevin?
I'll just jump to the streets, going down the essential list. I think this past fiscal year, we had some money in to do roof replacement. Contract came in to do it. It was way more expensive than had been estimated. So we're using that estimate, carrying it forward to next year to replace the roof at the streets department. The trash truck and replacement tractor, I think those were in last year as well. Obviously, the tractor is what hauls our beach rake, and trash truck, I think we're getting ready to sell one old one this year that's no longer operational. So that'll get us back up to our, I guess, five or six level. The Polaris is, we were borrowing a Polaris this year. That's for our boardwalk trash removal. We had taken hold of the Parks Department's Polaris, and we're using that. Now that they're fully staffed, they want their Polaris back, so we would like to replace that. We think it's a combination of the Polaris and the trailer is obviously much better than what we had with the big
Well,
trash truck.
and you know, we passed on to you, that we've gotten a lot of compliments.
Yes.
A lot of compliments on that alternate trash pickup. If you recall, one of the recommendations of the committee was to recommend to this board to consider funding, if they wanted, a custom truck or something. Because right now your system, and I would encourage you to consider that. You know, here you're putting $12,000 into something where you're still creating a system where it's manually intensive. They're putting it into the trailer and then they're manually removing it trailer versus hydraulically removing it or something like that.
Going down to the Wilmington Avenue, Delaware Avenue Storm Sewer, I think you'll probably recall that the first phase of that is being scoped and designed and lined this year. That's the corrugated metal pipe storm drain that runs underneath a large section of the boardwalk. It's in pretty bad shape. Want to do that, still want to get that done this year. And then the next phase of that is to run up the street where we have a significant issue with some sinkhole that has developed on the road that we continue to try to just patch. But while we have the lining contractor available, we want to try to add that to his scope. So what we would hope to do is be able to tie that into, when he comes to do the boardwalk section under the boardwalk, have him do the piece up, I believe it's Delaware, where we have the sinkhole developed, either Delaware or Wilmington. Part of the same sewer shed system. But to do that, take advantage of the mobilization costs while they're here and try to do that, because it's, in my mind, it's an emergency situation we need to do.
Do they have to take up a part of the boardwalk or can they tunnel under it?
Right now, the plan is, and they've done the video, so they're pretty confident they can just line it, so they don't have to dig up the boardwalk. They'll come in from the manholes. There may be some sections of boards that have to come up to make a turn, but for the most part, we can do it within the pipe itself.
So Kevin, if I'm following you, you're on line 22?
Yes.
And why wouldn't that say emergency instead of
That's what I
essential?
was just gonna say. If there's something that's called
I mean,
emergency, we need to know it's an emergency.
Why is
so
it
we
dumped
don't
in
have
with
to talk
other,
about it.
yeah, I,
It's my number one of essential. Does that help? But yes, it is. It's something I think we need to take care of while we have the lining contractor on site this year to do it. So we would try to get that, done spring.
Yeah, to me, 22 through 26, all things I think have to be done, because it's really infrastructure. And if we, keep putting the brakes on those things, all they do is pile up. It's not like they're gonna get any better.
Correct. They don't go away.
And they just get worse. And if somebody can tell me why we wouldn't do one of these between 22 and 26, that it could be put off for some reason, I'll listen, but I have a feeling that if we don't attack it now, it doesn't get any better.
At '23, it's one of those things we started planning on an annual basis to put something aside. And if you look at '24, that's got a second piece that's a little bit twice as large as the first piece.
Right.
Right, and you'll recall that that was under design this year. You paid for the assessment and the design this year. So we would want to go into at least the first phase of the construction.
Can you,
25, you've got to spend the money to be able to
To
receive.
catch 800,000,
Time.
correct.
I want to ask about 25 real quick, Stan, on item 25 there, the Lake Avenue Streetscape Phase 2. I was told that we put aside the funding from the 2018-2019 budget to fund this, but yet it's not highlighted as something that's in the budget. So it seems we're putting it in the budget twice now. So can somebody walk me through that? I was told it was set aside in the 2018-2019 budget, the current budget,
Yes.
not this budget.
Correct. 200,000 was set aside. And then essentially what happened was we went back to Kircher, correct? Went back to Kircher Engineering because we found out that the proposal that we had received was slightly under $1 million for our 200,000 portion, and then the state's 800,000.
Okay.
So the project was redesigned to include, was it Second Street all the way out to Rehoboth Avenue, that paving portion, which ultimately, I think, knocked off one of the streets in our paving plan.
Sure did. But even back up one step farther is, we couldn't execute it under this current budget
Right.
year because the grant money did not come.
Yes.
So it was not going to be available this FY.
And so I asked the question,
What happened to the 200 that was
Where's
set
the
aside this year?
200?
I'll look to my left.
Well, it's not spent, obviously. It just continues to, be absorbed, if you will, in in our fund balance.
so it's in the budget. So it should be highlighted here as in the budget because we set it aside in the 2018-2019 budget.
If in fact we did do that, I mean,
You said, I mean, that's kind of what you guys said. So that 200 shouldn't be here, or it should be already in the budget, carried over from the previous budget.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
So,
I just saved us $200,000 here. I just want to note that
I'm sure
for the
we fixed
record.
something else with that
Okay.
money, is my guess. But I'll look to
Well,
my
we
left.
said we weren't allowed
Lot
to
of
do that.
paving.
But we were told we had to set it aside in 2019
Because we
because of the
expected-
grant. No, because of the grant
Right.
restrictions required us to set it aside.
we needed to show that it was.
That's
set
right.
aside. Yes. And it will be,
So it shouldn't be an unfunded requirement here. It should just be in the budget and carried over from previous year budget. So we should have 200K knocked off of unfunded requirements in the CIP at this point. Or where's that 200,000?
It sounds like it was used for something else, so that's the
No, but
question.
we were
Was
told
used
it
for
wasn't
something
going to
else?
be used for
no, it's
something
not
else.
used. So
Because we couldn't.
Bert can explain, how we go from one year to the next. But also, the TAP requirements are that they are in the budget for the year that the funds are going to be approved. And that, I don't think, is until August. They make their decision July, August. So it needs to go into the 2020 budget, so that's where the money will be spent.
But we already have the money. It's not coming out of, because it was set aside from this year's budget. It's in this year's
Is it a
budget.
carryover?
We were told it was in this year's budget and would be carried over for execution in 2019. So why is it in the 2020 budget or 2019? I'm not clear.
So
What happened to that 200K from this year's budget?
you close the books, Bert, you don't carry that 200,000 over, correct?
It wasn't restricted for,
It was, right? We were told it was restricted.
yeah, it was not restricted.
Meaning,
So we spent that money that was in the 2018, 2019 budget.
Well, when you put a restriction, when you have an item, there's several levels of, for accounting purposes of restrictions, and that wasn't restricted by government or the commissioners. It was just wasn't
So
restricted.
where's the $200,000 that should have, that's in this year's budget for this project? Like, what happened to that? Did it get spent somewhere else? I mean, I just want to kind of be transparent about
It
that.
did not get spent anywhere else.
Okay, so it's set aside.
It's in the budget.
Okay.
But when Bert closes the books for this fiscal year, it doesn't roll over into the next fiscal year. So that's why it needs to be budgeted again.
But,
It's not spent,
but we approved it last year,
correct?
and it wasn't spent. So where's that $200,000 we approved for this year's budget?
It wasn't carried over.
So where is it?
Went to the bottom line?
Yeah, it's in the bottom line.
It's not like you got to,
So it's basically any kind of surplus or deficit that we have, that's where it is,
Oh.
of the general fund.
It's in the fund balance.
So it's still sitting
Okay,
there and
still
it's
sitting.
available?
That's my question. It's in the
Okay.
fund balance.
Because it won't be spent this year, you need to budget it again.
I mean, if our fund balance has a surplus of $200,000 in it,
Okay.
we can go in and ask for it and pull it out. But if it doesn't, we have to put it in the CIP. It's not locked up in a lockbox that we took off
That was my
2018 and put it in
impression.
2019.
Okay, that was my impression when I had asked last year. So basically, it's unfunded now.
Yes.
And that's why it's in the CIP.
It's unfunded.
And
Even though we have an obligation to fund something under this grant, it's unfunded right now, unless we approve it here.
I think as the mayor said, you know, it's sitting in your fund balance because you didn't spend it. So
Okay.
we can go ahead, I mean, basically, one way to report this, you have several levels of restrictions.
Yeah.
And we can, as we did for the building project years ago, we set aside in our fund balance an item identified as restricted for the, and basically, it's basically all you're going to do is reduce your fund balance and set up a line item that's called, you know, the 200,000 for the streetscape. And if you vote on
So
it, we can.
if we decide to say, okay, that's not a priority, that 200,000, what happens?
Well, you have the authority to take it out of there if you want. I mean, but it's basically combined in one number in the fund balance. And we can go ahead and put a formal restriction on that if you wanted to do it that way.
And just to clarify,
I beat this to death, so go ahead, please.
in order to qualify for the $800,000 grant from the state, the new budget needs to show that we have 200,000 allocated.
Correct.
And that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
We don't want to lose the $800,000.
Right. Just
So,
want to
so
clarify.
Pat, as you said, from 22 through and including 26, I agree, they're very important, but it's 1.9 million. So it's basically half of what's, a little bit less than half of what the CIP overall is, that is unfunded at this point in time. So it's obviously something to consider as we move forward, because we've got to start to figure out where it's going to come from. Because I do agree. I mean, I think the city staff did a great job with the citywide paving this year. I've heard very positive things all over town, and it looks beautiful. But I think these are the type of things, and especially if this grant does show up in August, we've got to have the money to collect it, because otherwise we can't collect it. But these are projects, again, we spoke about last year on how important they were last year, and they still have to be done. Sorry, didn't mean. Now it's back to you, Kevin.
The only other thing I would like to highlight is the next line after 28, or after the wayfinding, I'm sorry, which is a new entry. I don't think you saw an entry for that projected last year. But because of the issues we do have with our stormwater system and the aging infrastructure, I think we need to be proactive with assessing them and see how they look. And in order to do that, we've got to get a CCTV crew in to start cameraing certain sections of the storm sewer to find out where we need to focus our repair monies.
Can I interrupt you? You've got that on line 28. I'm going down to line 72. That's completely different. Just want to make sure everybody knows that it's the same. It says sewer cameras. It also says 200,000. It's not a repeat. It's two separate storm versus.
Correct, one storm, one is sanitary. So, yeah.
So Kevin, on line 28, why is it just desirable as opposed to essential?
Well, we could continue to do what we might have done over the past several years and just wait for it to fail and then go in and fix it.
I mean,
that
it
is an
sounds-
option. As you come up to, I mean, obviously, yes, I like your point. I would be very happy to make that essential.
Well,
If we think that that would ultimately make the,
And I think, obviously, given what happened this year and what you found right after you came on board down on Rehoboth Avenue about, I know it was only like, I don't know, it wasn't that much in the way of repair, but it was something that really needed to be done, and who knows how long it's been broken.
And what has happened in a lot of the cases is you have the old concrete pipe and it was just butt jointed, and as those things start to settle and sag, you get the cracks, and as the rain and water comes flushing through there, it starts washing out the soil. So we've had sinkholes develop, throughout the town that we've been trying to address on an individual basis. This is an effort to try to get ahead of the game, start doing, I think he'd set up 5 zones throughout the city, kind of focus them on the older sections first, do that zone first, get an overall assessment, and then target where we want to go in and do either line it or replace it, whatever we need to do. But this would give us the data, the intel to be able to figure out what we want to go fix.
So the $200,000 is for 5 zones, or you're saying 1 zone each year?
Correct.
1 zone each year.
Correct, and we would prioritize the zone based upon the, kind of the age and where we're seeing the problem.
So we've worked with Beacon Engineering before, and this $200,000 number is pretty solid.
Correct, and correct, for the assessment.
Well, I agree with it for determining condition, et cetera, but I know from what they did on Second Street, they found a lot of additional unmarked pipes that were entering into the system, correct? And of course, my desire, I mention it every year, that to map the system, and especially with respect to mapping these unknown pipes that go in there from the hotels and things that empty into the catch basins, which then empty into the lakes. And I hope that that's part of your program to do that.
Kevin,
this
where's
could
the
really be
study
viewed-
for,
Go ahead, Lisa.
where in the budget is the study to look at this is kind of a lot of really focused on kind of the South Rehoboth issues, which I definitely understand as a priority. Where in the budgets to do the study for for North Rehoboth and the stormwater issues there?
That's in the budget, engineering budget in this, not in the CIP.
Right, where, just for my own, where is it in the budget? Like, is it under like contracting or storm
be in several
sewer?
places, but
Like
I
you have
think-
like $20,000. Okay, gotcha. I'll find it.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what
as
that-
long as that's on your radar there
Right, in
for
fact,
the
it's-
north side.
I
Okay,
pulled that out while where you were talking before. It's the
Okay.
area bounded by Columbia, Third, Lake, and Fifth. That's kind of the boundary of that area that's without storm sewer.
yep, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So that's study and scoping
Correct,
this year
this
and then real quick, just before we move off the stormwater, is what I understand is that we used to flush the pipes, the stormwater pipes, or maybe I'm thinking of sewer. There's been a lot of sewer backups this year, I've heard from our folks, from property owners. And I understand we used to flush the pipes at the beginning of the year to clear out any debris, find out if there's issues. Do we still do that? Is that something in the budget? I'm just curious,
Part
your
of
thoughts
just
on
the
that.
general operation and maintenance
Okay.
lines in the wastewater department's budget.
Okay,
They go to areas, mainly the restaurant areas, and do where we habitually have problems with clogs.
okay. But not the residential areas?
Typically not, although
Okay.
if there's an area, as I understand it, if there's an area that gets a lot, that they go
Okay.
back through. A problem over there,
Okay.
throughout the city, obviously, we
Yeah,
have
is
clay
the
pipe
trees.
and a lot of trees.
Yeah,
So we
gotcha.
love our
Thank you.
trees, we don't like our roots.
Yes.
For the sewer system.
Thank
So-
you. Sorry, Dick.
I'm
Please.
good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just informationally, if we can kind of wrap it up in 15 minutes, and I'm not trying to rush you. We can continue with you next time because we've got more.
Right, so those are really the ones I wanted to highlight on the streets. If there's anything specific you'd like to chat about, we can, or ask for additional information when we come back, like the breakout on the restroom facilities on the boardwalk, be happy to do that. And then the next one I have starts on 71. talk about the sewer system. The only one I really want to talk about is the very first one, the CCTV, same philosophy as we had on the storm sewer is. The other major items in the wastewater, we've talked about at length over the last few days as to what those phases and the urgency for some of those phases. So in my mind, too, the continuation of phase 2 and get that to construction is essential / emergency. The phase 3, again, because we have a signed agreement with the county that we're not going to be able to live up to by the end of this year. Either way, I think phase 3, based on my read of the tea leaves from Saturday, is we need to go ahead and get that under contract for the design of that phase 3 system.
That's the one on 85?
Correct.
That
Correct.
is all the way over in 2024, but we need to put that in the design phase sooner rather than later.
What's the design phase cost?
Oh, yeah, figure 10%, you know, for
10%? Okay.
figuring. So I would look to move 400 up into immediately this year and then probably construct the following 2 years. And then I got kind of off track. Talking about the sewer system zones, we did the same thing with the assessment of breaking it out into zones, do the CCTV, find out where our real weak spots are. We have an idea from experience, but we also have an idea of where we want to look based upon the asset management report was commissioned by the city 2 years ago, I think, which shows the age of the pipes in certain parts of the city. And we would, focus our effort on those zones that are the greatest risk to us and start there. But that, again, is just for the video and assessment phase of the various zones. While we got a couple minutes, I'll go into water, just a couple of things. We got a grant this year to do what we're calling a facilities plan. So I think you've provided $35,000, I think, and it's matched to 30-some thousand from the state to do a facilities plan. And that's going to help us, I think. We had some money into last year to do these rehabs of 6, 3A, and 7. I think the facilities plan will give us a much better idea of how much they are required. It'll tell us, flow rates into various portions of the pipe. It'll show us condition. It'll show us where we can move flows around, all those kind of things which help us with the operation of the system. At the same time, they'll look at those facilities with respect to what they think the life expectancy of them is, as opposed to, again, looking at the asset management report from several years ago. This will give us a real-time look at the condition of those. We had, this year we had a consultant come out and do an inspection and assessment at our Lynchwell facility. We have an air stripper system there and a carbon filtration system there. So we just today, in fact, got the report back on the carbon filtration system. The air strippers were in very good condition they're 10, 11 years old now. And same with the carbon filtration system. So we're going to need to look for an opportunity to replace the carbon filter media in there. So I've talked with Evan this morning. I do want to add, and again, we can do however it works out better for the funding of it, but it's about $140,000 to replace the carbon media in the 4 large carbon filter systems we have out there. We can, because of the way they're configured, you can do it either in series or in parallel. So we could do, I'll ask him to add either 140 as one lump, or we could do 70 and 70. But I think I need to get that added in as an essential repair based upon the report we got from them just today. So we'll add that to it. And then the other item, water meter replacement program. I don't think that was in last year's CIP plan either. So our issue with the water meters is that we have about 6,000 water meters that we're responsible for, of which 4,000 of them are 20 to 25 years old. Typical life expectancy on a meter, 15 to 20. They're warranted up through, at various percentages, up to 20. So whatever that is, 60-some% of our meters are beyond their life expectancy. So I want to start a program that would just systematically start replacing volumes of these. Right now we do whatever is required for either new construction or renovations, or somebody just wants to replace out a meter. And we do about 200 a year in-house in the normal course of a year. Obviously, that will it's not sustainable to do 200 a year to work through our 6,000, 4,000 plus or minus that are 20 to 25 years old. So I want to institute a program where we'll just systematically replace 300, 400, 500 of these each year. So we looked at an area of town that would be nice, easy as a test case to kind of, let's break out, where can we do a group? First, in my mind, was let's go up Route 1, because that's where our big high-volume users are. A lot of our old ones are out there. If we're losing revenue from meters, I mean, that would be a place where we might be losing a lot. Those are also going to be the ones that are very hard to do. So what we've come up with in talking with our water engineer and our in-house staff is the North Shores area is an area we have a lot of really old meters in, and an area we have a lot of problem with when it comes time to read the meters and the like. So we thought we would try to start with a group that's about 300 meters, get the contract done such that we can learn from the first one. It's a smaller than I would like to do initially, you know, in a big batch, but it gives us a good tight shot group on ones that we could do a contract to do 300, figure out in our contract language, do we get it right? Is it better to do it by meter? Is it better for us to buy meters, give to them or whatever? But learn those lessons before we go, you know, resource or system-wide with a system to get these meters replaced. But I think we're losing a lot of water because we've got old meters. They're not as accurate as the new meters. And obviously that's lost revenue. So I'd like to start in a nice little tight shot group, learn our lessons, and then apply that starting with our high volume areas to try to reclaim whatever we're missing from lost water.
And the user doesn't pay for these. It's built into our billing
Correct.
system.
Correct, right.
But is it passed back to North Shores
Yes.
in any significant way?
Only if
No,
we,
only in their rate, yeah.
only if we increase the fee,
Correct.
right?
That's correct, right. That's all I really wanted to highlight for this year on the water program.
And I'm going to use that as an end time. Just informationally, you know, as Kevin was on water, just be reminded that this does not include the CIP that GHD put in front of us for water, which is, you know, stuff to be done over the next 5 years, which is $5+ million that will be part of probably our rate increases that you saw before. So, but that is not in here, and it sounds like it's probably needed. And I agree with you on the replacement or the testing of those meters. Obviously, testing them, you know, if they've already reached their useful life, they're probably going to go. But you know, obviously, with all this new construction that's going on in town, the technology that they're putting into the toilets and the bathtubs and all this stuff is so much better than it used to be. And so if we can, you know, as construction is being done, put in newer meters, but go back to some of the older meters and check them, because I guarantee you a lot of those places, it's like a toilet's running and it's a gallon here and a gallon there and a gallon there. And that's a great way to do it, and probably a positive thing for the
Another thing this will help us do is that right now, because 3/4 of our water meters that we're doing, you have to physically go touch to get a reading off of. So part of this system is to then get them upgraded to the new, first the radio readable, so you can drive down the street and take the reading. But we're using the model that was then migratable over to the type that if we ever get to where we could read them all sitting here in the building somewhere and look and see which ones are working and not working.
Yeah,
They would be compatible to that system.
I was speaking to Jeff Sturtevant about it the other day, and, you know, apparently with this new technology, or maybe Bert would said it, that you can read a huge number of meters from a tower, and you can do it in an afternoon, whereas if we wanted to do it and go around, it would take 3 weeks.
It takes us about 3 weeks with virtually nothing else happening in the water department.
Yeah, you
So
know,
everybody
but-
load up, go start touching meters.
Yeah, with this new technology, you know, it's so much easier to read, and we can not only make it better as far as less leakage, but a better process to administer. Okay, with that, I am,
Let me
oh,
just
sorry.
make a comment. I don't want to give you all a lot of homework. I would be satisfied with just having that total of essentials and desirables. And as far as segregating them all, I'm fine with this sheet. I can highlight my own as essentials and
We'll
desirables.
work it up to where it's manageable, and Mayor, maybe we start off the next budget meeting talking about revenue sources?
Yep. Yep, that sounds fine. And so, as your homework, you're gonna kind of desirable, whatever, on the things that are on the CIP, but you're also gonna break down the boardwalk, the restrooms, whatever. Because I don't think those other things need to be broken down. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Thank you very much,
Thank
everybody.
you.
That was very helpful.
Good, very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you just said.
Slipped through the cracks. Before January 1st. Has been sent. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe a dollar amount for the trash.
I've already broken out the restroom stuff.
I'll send them to you. You need 'em